The wind crawled across the Helmand plain like a living thing, dragging heat and dust through the broken mud walls of a forgotten Afghan village. The call to prayer had ended an hour ago, and the valley lay still, eerily still. From her position on the ridge, Sergeant Mara Keene watched through her scope as the desert bled into the horizon, her finger resting lightly on the trigger guard. 3 months into her deployment, the silence had become a second language. The world through her scope was slow, deliberate. Her heartbeats marked time like a metronome. Around her, the snipers of Delta Platoon lay camouflaged among the stones, breathing shallow, speaking only in hand signals. Mara's partner, Corporal Elise, whispered through the calms. Movement. Roof 1 o'clock. Can't tell if it's a spotter. She adjusted her scope, lips tightening. A flicker of movement, a flash of cloth, then gone. The distance was nearly 800 meters, too far for certainty, too close for comfort. She exhaled slow. The training came back like ritual. Observe, calculate, commit. But something about that flash felt wrong. Too deliberate, too staged. Hold fire, she said softly. Elise gave a frustrated sigh. Command said if we see hostiles. I said hold. Her voice was steady, low, the tone that carried weight even over static. Minutes stretched. The sun dragged itself higher, pressing heat against the stone. Flies hovered around the bodies of goats below, the only movement for miles. Then across the radio, the call came in. Delta 3, this is Falcon Command. Convoy rolling through grid 9A and 10. Maintain overwatch. Mara gave a curt nod. The armored trucks would be crossing the open valley. The perfect kill zone if insurgents were waiting. She wiped sweat from her brow with her sleeve and glanced back at Elise. You ever think about what this place used to be? She murmured. Elise frowned. Before the war. Before all of it. He gave a dry laugh. Don't get poetic on me, Keene. But she wasn't smiling. Her eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, where heat shimmered off the sand like ghosts. The convoy appeared, a long silver thread of Humvees kicking up clouds behind them. Mara adjusted her scope again. Her world shrank to a circle of glass. Movement, rooftop again. A shadow this time. Then glint, raise, she breathed. He's got glass. She lined up the shot. The rifle felt alive beneath her hands. The .82A1 Barrett, her closest companion. She knew its weight, its whisper, the way it kicked like a heartbeat. Target locked, 821 meters. Wind 6 left. Elise muttered something she didn't hear. Her breath slowed. 1, 2. The world narrowed to a trigger pull. The rifle thundered. Echo rolled through the valley. A second later, a body dropped behind the wall. Elise whooped quietly. Hit confirmed. Nice work, Sergeant. But she didn't celebrate. She stared through the scope, following the arc of dust and blood on the rooftop. A child. A small boy rushed forward, crying over the fallen man. Her chest tightened. It wasn't a spotter. It was a father. And suddenly, all the heat in the world couldn't burn away the cold settling inside her. Night came slow. The air turned sharp, and the stars cut like knives. They regrouped at the outpost, the others laughing, eating cold rations, trading stories. Elise told the story of her perfect shot, the one that saved the convoy. They called her the Ice Queen, clinking tin mugs. She smiled faintly, just enough to pass for human. But later, when she sat alone cleaning her rifle, she saw the boy's face again. How small he looked, how suddenly the world had ended for him. She paused, her hands trembling over the bolt. The weapon gleamed in the lantern light. In the mirror of the steel, she saw her own reflection staring back. Sunburned skin, sand-chapped lips, eyes too tired for her age. And beneath the patch on her shoulder, the black skull of the recon Marines, she felt something breaking. 2 weeks later, they were reassigned. A village east of Lashkar Gah, a suspected weapons cache. Standard sweep, they said, in and out. But Mara had learned that in Afghanistan, in and out usually meant not everyone comes back. At dawn, they rolled in. Smoke rose from clay ovens, children ran barefoot through alleys. The squad moved like ghosts, scanning doorways, rooftops, windows. Then detonation, and wide ripped through the first Humvee. Fire bloomed, sound vanished. Mara hit the ground hard, her ears ringing, vision blurred. She smelled burning rubber, metal, blood. Reyes was screaming for a medic. Someone else was already gone. She crawled for her rifle, hands shaking. Through the smoke she saw figures moving. 3, maybe 4, darting between walls, enemy. She steadied her breathing, aimed, fired, once, twice. The crack of her rifle echoed through the ruin. 2 fell, but when she sighted the third, the figure wasn't holding a weapon. It was a woman, clutching a child, eyes wide with terror. Mara froze. For a moment the desert was utterly silent. Then the child reached out, crying. The woman turned and the man behind her raised an axe. Mara fired. The woman fell first, then the man, and again silence. When the dust cleared, the squad regrouped. Command praised her composure, her precision under fire. "You saved lives," they told her. But all she heard was the echo of her shot. Again and again. She stared at the horizon as the sun went down, crimson bleeding into gold. "You saved lives," they said. Maybe. But somewhere a boy had lost both his parents. And didn't even know her name. The desert never forgot. It remembered every drop of blood, every echo of a rifle's breath. The wind carried those memories like whispers through the canyons, and at night, when even the insects fell silent, Sergeant Mara Keene could almost hear them calling her name. 2 months had passed since the ambush near Lashkar Gah. Officially, she was fine. Stable vitals, commendations for bravery, psychologically cleared for continued duty. But inside, her silence had grown heavier. It wrapped around her like a second uniform, invisible, suffocating, impossible to remove. The others didn't see it. To them, she was still the Ice Queen, the unshakable sniper who could drop a target from a kilometer out without blinking. They didn't know that sometimes, when she closed her eyes, she saw the boy again, the way he had clutched his father's blood-stained shirt, the way her scope had become a window into grief she could never undo. At night, she sat on the rooftop of the forward operating base, watching the endless sprawl of stars over the Afghan desert. The air smelled of sand and diesel. Somewhere below, laughter drifted from the barracks. Crude jokes, poker games, music leaking from tinny speakers. Mara sat alone, the rifle across her knees, her fingers tracing the notches on the barrel, each one marking a confirmed kill. There were more now, too many. She had stopped counting after 27. Behind her, the door creaked. Captain Mallory stepped out, his boots scraping the gravel. He was built like a statue carved out of old discipline, gray at the temples, scars crossing one hand. "You should sleep," he said, lighting a cigarette. "We've got movement reports near Sanjin tomorrow." She didn't look up. "You trust those reports?" Mallory gave a thin smile. "Intel's wrong as often as it's right, but we move anyway." He took a drag, the ember glowing red in the dark. "You did good work last month. The convoy made it through." Command noticed. Mara didn't answer. The words slid off her like dust off armor. Mallory studied her for a long moment. "Something on your mind, Sergeant?" Her eyes stayed on the horizon. "Just wondering if good work still feels good when you stop feeling human." The captain didn't reply right away. He blew out smoke, watching it fade into the wind. "You're not the first to ask that," he said finally, "and you won't be the last." He walked away, leaving her alone with the stars and the ghosts. The next morning came wrapped in heat and tension. The briefing was short. Reconnaissance near the outskirts of Sanjin, potential insurgent activity in abandoned compounds. Delta Platoon would lead overwatch, neutralize threats if necessary. "Rules of engagement are clear," Mallory said, scanning their faces. "We confirm weapons before we fire." We're not here to play judge and jury." Mara nodded absently. She had heard those words before. They sounded noble on paper. Less so when your crosshairs were on a trembling hand that might or might not be holding a detonator. By noon, the team was in position. The hills above Sanjin were jagged and dry, littered with stones and fragments of old walls. Through her scope, Mara watched the compound below. A cluster of low mud brick houses, half collapsed. Women moved between them, carrying water. Children played in the dust. But something was off. The rhythm of life felt staged, too perfect, too quiet. She scanned again and saw it. A flicker of light beneath a sheet of tin near one of the walls. A reflection, glass, optics. Her pulse slowed, Ray's east wall, 200 meters, they've got eyes. He followed her direction, then cursed under his breath. You sure? Positive. Adjusting for range, she breathed out, settling into the stillness. But just as she prepared to squeeze the trigger, movement erupted. A group of men spilled out of a doorway shouting. One of them dragged a young girl by the arm, her face streaked with tears. Through the scope, Mara saw the rifle barrel pressed against the child's temple. Her gut twisted. Ray's voice came through, sharp and panicked. Keen, orders? We've got a hostage situation. Hold fire, what? Hold fire, damn it. The insurgents were shouting at someone. A translator, maybe, or a villager. The girl was screaming, the gun jerking dangerously close to her face. Mara tracked the man holding her. The shot was possible, barely. But one twitch, one wrong breath, and she'd kill the child instead. Her finger trembled on the trigger. Come on, come on, she whispered. Ray's was swearing beside her. Keen, we're losing control of the situation. Command's asking for a go. Tell them to wait. Mara? She didn't answer. Her world was narrowing again. Heat, wind, pulse. The man shouted something and the girl flinched. For one instant his head lifted, exposing the soft line beneath his jaw. Mara fired. The man dropped. The girl fell free, stumbling backward into the dust. The others scattered. Target down. Ray's muttered, still catching his breath. Nice shot, but Mara wasn't breathing. She stayed in the scope, staring at the girl, watching her small chest rise and fall, the tears streaking through the dirt on her face. When the team moved in later to clear the compound, the girl clung to one of the medics, refusing to let go. Mara watched from a distance, unseen. That night, she couldn't sleep. The days blurred after that. Missions stacked one after another. Raids, ambushes, long overwatch shifts under sun and dust. She became quieter, more mechanical. The other Marines noticed but didn't question it. They thought it was professionalism. It wasn't, it was exhaustion. Sometimes she'd wake up gasping, convinced she was back in that compound, the child's face swimming in the sights of her rifle. Other nights she'd dream of the boy, the one from the first village. Always the same dream. He stood on the rooftop, the wind tearing through his clothes, holding his father's rifle. He'd look at her through an invisible scope, and she couldn't move. Then she'd wake, heart hammering, drenched in sweat. One evening she received a letter. Paper, not email. The handwriting was old-fashioned, tight, disciplined. It was from Lieutenant Colonel Pierce, her former instructor at Quantico. He'd written, heard about Sanjin. Word travels fast. You always had the instincts that couldn't be taught. But instincts come with a cost. Don't let the war own more of you than it already has. She read it twice, then folded it carefully and tucked it into the lining of her rifle case. That same night, she was summoned by Captain Mallory. New orders, he said, sliding a folder across the desk. High-value target in Nurzai district. Local intel says he's been orchestrating bombings across Helmand. You'll lead Overwatch. Precision strike if he shows. Mara flipped through the file. The photo showed a man in his 50s with eyes like black stone. Around him, children, markets, families. He hides in plain sight, Mallory said. So we wait until he's alone. She nodded, though her stomach tightened. Another man, another life reduced to coordinates. They set up before dawn. The world was gray and empty. Through her scope, she watched the target's compound. Men came and went. Women carried bread and water. A radio played somewhere. Life, pretending to be ordinary. Hours passed. Then the door opened. The man stepped out, adjusting his scarf. Alone. Target confirmed, Reyes said quietly. Orders are clear. Take him, Mara sighted in. Her breath slowed. But behind the man, in the shadow of the doorway, she saw movement. Small, fragile. A child again, a little boy tugging at the man's sleeve. Her finger froze. The voice in her headset crackled. Sergeant Keene, take the shot. She didn't move. Keene, respond. She stared through the scope, unable to breathe. The boy looked up, eyes bright, unaware. Her heart pounded. Her finger hovered over the trigger. Then she lowered the rifle. Negative, she said quietly. He's not alone. The radio went silent. Then Mallory's voice, cold and precise. That's not your call, Sergeant. Execute the order. She closed her eyes. "Sir, with respect, I won't." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. They pulled her from Overwatch within the hour. By evening, the base was buzzing. Rumors, whispers, judgment. Some called her a coward, others said she'd lost her nerve. Mallory didn't speak to her, not yet, but she knew it was coming. That night, she sat again on the roof, watching the stars. The desert wind whispered over the outpost walls. She thought of the boy, of the girl, of all the ghosts that lived behind her eyelids. And for the first time, she didn't see herself as broken. She saw herself as awake. The war had demanded obedience. She had given it. Now it demanded her soul. That she would not give. In the morning, she was summoned to the command tent. Mallory was there, along with a representative from intelligence, a man in civilian clothes, sharp-eyed and smiling like someone who didn't have to pull a trigger to feel powerful. He spoke first, Sergeant Keene. "You refused a direct order in combat conditions. That's grounds for court-martial." Mara said nothing. Mallory watched her quietly, his expression unreadable. The intelligence man leaned forward. "Do you understand what that means?" Her gaze was steady. "I understand." "Then why?" She hesitated. "Because no war built on killing children's fathers ever wins." The man's smile vanished. Mallory's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. After a long silence, the intelligence officer closed the file. "You'll be reassigned pending review." He left. Mallory remained. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, he said, "You know they'll bury this. Say it was an operational misjudgment." She nodded. "Let them." Mallory studied her, then exhaled slowly. "You remind me of someone I used to be." When she left the tent, the wind had picked up again. Dry, relentless, carrying the scent of gunpowder and heat. She walked past the firing range where recruits practiced with borrowed rifles, shouting and laughing. One of them called out, "Hey, Sergeant Keene, show us how the Ice Queen does it." She stopped, turned and looked at the boy holding the rifle. Barely 20, eyes full of bravado. Mara took the weapon, tested the balance. The metal was still warm. She raised it, aimed at a row of distant cans, and fired. Each one fell, one by one. Then she handed the rifle back. "You don't need to be cold," she said softly. "You just need to see clearly." And she walked away, the desert wind swirling around her like the sigh of a world slowly learning to heal. By the time the orders came down, the desert had begun to turn cold again. Night stretched longer, shadows moved slower. The war, that endless, grinding thing, had swallowed another season. But Sergeant Mara Keene no longer moved as part of its machinery. She was stationed now at Camp Shorai, a forward logistics base closer to the edge of Helmand than to safety. Officially, she was on administrative reassignment. Unofficially, she had become a ghost that no one wanted to acknowledge, the sniper who refused to shoot. Her barracks was quieter than the rest. She shared it with boxes of medical supplies, spare tires, and silence. The others avoided her, not out of hate, but discomfort. In a place where obedience was survival, disobedience was contagious. Every morning, she ran the perimeter alone. The gravel crunched beneath her boots. The horizon stayed indifferent. At night, she cleaned her rifle, though she hadn't been issued ammunition in weeks. To some, it looked like punishment. To her, it was clarity. She was finally free of orders that demanded her conscience. But freedom came with its own ghosts. A convoy was scheduled for the following morning, humanitarian supplies to a nearby village that had been without water for days. Command treated it like a goodwill gesture. The locals saw it as bait. When the sun rose, Mara stood by the vehicles, helmet strapped, rifle slung but unloaded. She was there to observe, not engage. That was the agreement. Captain Mallory approached, his face lined with fatigue and something close to guilt. "You didn't have to volunteer," he said quietly. Mara glanced toward the horizon, where the dunes shimmered. "You think they'll try something?" He hesitated. "They always try something." He handed her a sidearm anyway. Just in case, she didn't argue. They rolled out at dawn. The roads were narrow, twisting through dust-colored villages, where life clung stubbornly to the edges of ruin. Children watched from rooftops. Men lingered in doorways, their expressions unreadable. For the first hour, everything stayed quiet. Then, As they passed an abandoned gas station, the lead vehicle halted. Over the radio, a voice crackled. "We've got movement, North Ridge." Mara's hand tightened on the rifle instinctively, though she wasn't supposed to fire. She lifted her binoculars, scanning the ridge. 3 figures. Stationary, watching. "Could be shepherds," someone muttered. "No flocks," Mara replied. The silence that followed was thick enough to feel. Mallory's voice came over the channel. "Keen, stay alert, we proceed." They moved forward slowly. The ridge loomed closer, the figures vanished. Then a blast. The shock wave tore through the air, throwing dust, metal, and screams into chaos. The second truck was gone, smoke rising where it had stood seconds ago. Ambush, North Ridge, gunfire erupted. Bullets carved the air, striking dirt and armor. Mara dove behind a barrier, scanning the ridge. Shapes flickered between rocks. Muzzle flashes, movement. Her rifle was still cold. No ammo. She looked toward the burning truck. Saw medics dragging wounded men, Mallory shouting orders. The convoy was pinned. She grabbed her comm. "Raise, sniper fire, 3rd ridge to the left." "Can you get a visual?" No response. Static. She tried again. Nothing. Her heart pounded. She reached for her rifle, snapped it open. Empty. Mallory's voice roared through the chaos. "Keen, you're unarmed, stay down." But she wasn't listening. Her eyes tracked the ridge, following the pattern of flashes, the rhythm of the shots. 1 pause 3. 1 pause 3. A trained shooter, a sniper. She scanned higher and saw it. A glint of glass, a faint shimmer of scope light, half hidden behind a broken wall. He was positioned perfectly. High ground, full view of the convoy. Her body moved before her mind could. She sprinted through the open, weaving between wreckage and smoke. Her lungs burning. Bullets snapped past her. Dust filled her mouth. She reached the wreck of the second truck, climbed onto it, searching for the fallen. Her eyes caught a glimpse. Raised, motionless, blood seeping through his vest. Beside him lay his rifle, a high-caliber Mohn 110. Loaded, she didn't think. She lifted it, felt its weight, heavier than her own, still warm. Mallory saw her. "Keen, don't." But she was already on her stomach, scope aligned, breath steady. The ridge shimmered through heat, her pulse slowed. There, the sniper, adjusting his aim. Mara's finger curled around the trigger. She fired. The world contracted into silence. The enemy's sniper fell backward, lifeless. When the dust settled, the ridge was clear. The convoy survived. They evacuated the wounded. Hours later, back at Camp Shorai, Mallory found her sitting by the perimeter fence, rifle across her knees. The sunset painted her armor in orange and gold. He stood there for a long time before speaking. "You disobeyed again," he said softly. "You weren't supposed to engage." She looked up. "I didn't kill him because they told me to. I killed him because he was killing my people." Mallory nodded slowly. "And that's the difference, isn't it?" Neither spoke for a long time. The base hummed with distant activity, the clang of metal, the laughter of men alive by chance. Finally he said, words spreading. "About what you did." "About what you didn't do." Mara raised an eyebrow. "Meaning, they're calling you the shot that wasn't fired." She gave a faint, weary smile. "Sounds like bad poetry," Mallory exhaled, looking out at the desert. "Maybe. But the story's getting around. How you refused the order, how you saved lives anyway. The new recruits, they're starting to ask questions." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that make command nervous." A few days later she was summoned again, not to be reprimanded, but to be transferred. Back to the States. Temporary leave, for reassessment. The words felt like exile. But there was no anger left in her, only calm acceptance. She packed her gear quietly, folded her uniform, cleaned her rifle one last time. When she boarded the transport helicopter, she looked down at the base, the small grid of lives still fighting, still believing. She wasn't sure if she belonged among them anymore. Months later, Mara stood on the shooting range at Quantico, wind slicing through her hair. Civilians trained nearby. Journalists, recruits, young Marines who'd grown up hearing about her refusal. One of them, a young woman barely 20, approached hesitantly. "Ma'am," she said, "is it true? You disobeyed a direct kill order?" Mara studied her, the nervous hands, the hope in her eyes. "Depends who's telling the story, but you saved a lot of people. You stopped the sniper, and you didn't shoot the man with the kid. Mara nodded slightly. That's true. The girl hesitated. Weren't you afraid of what they'd do to you? Mara smiled faintly. Of course, but fear's not the worst thing that happens to a soldier. Forgetting why you fight is. The young woman looked at her rifle. Can you show me how you did it? Mara raised an eyebrow, then nodded. She guided the girl's hands, corrected her stance. The range echoed softly. Measured shots, calm breathing. After a while, the girl lowered her rifle. I heard they made a saying about you, she said. That sometimes the bravest shot is the one you don't take. Mara's gaze drifted toward the horizon. The sky was a soft blue, and for once, it didn't feel like it was hiding anything. She said quietly, almost to herself, then maybe they finally understand. That night, she sat alone by the water near the base, waves lapping softly against the shore. She thought of all the faces, the men she'd lost, the ones she'd saved, the children whose lives still flickered somewhere across the desert. She would never know how many stories began because she had chosen not to end one. A soft breeze lifted the edge of her jacket. Somewhere in the distance, fireworks flared. A ceremony, a celebration she hadn't attended. She didn't need medals anymore. Her victory was quieter, found in every life still breathing because she had seen the line between duty and conscience and refused to cross it. Years later, they would tell her story differently. Some said she had frozen, others said she had disobeyed. But among those who had been there, the ones who had seen her raise a rifle, lower it, and still win the day, they told it the right way. They said that when the Marine snipers failed, she borrowed a rifle and reminded the world that strength isn't in the trigger, it's in the restraint.